Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Lydia. Today I want to show you how to make a super easy sourdough sandwich bread. So this recipe, you basically mix everything and you forget it until the next day. So it's no fuss. I really love it. If you guys like sourdough breads and you guys just don't want to do all that fussing that the artisan breads require, try this recipe. It's super easy and you guys will be extremely pleased with the results. So to get started the night before, I like to weigh all of my ingredients. So I'm using a scale to weigh my flour. I'm using 600 grams of all-purpose flour. I'm using King Arthur. Just use good quality flour, whatever you consider good quality. So weigh that. You do need a scale for this. I just get consistent results, so that's why I am using a scale. Once I've added enough flour, you want to add in your salt. I like my bread a slight bit more salty, so I'm using 14 grams of salt. And then I just stirred up everything just so it's combined to some extent. It wasn't perfect, but I'm just trying to combine it. I just find that combining it is better than, when you do it, when you add the liquids. I don't know. Sometimes I get that chunk of salt and I just don't like it. So make sure you stir it all up. Here's my bubbly starter, super active. So I'm basically using my sourdough discard that you could toss out, which I never do, but I'm using my discard to make my bread. I'm using 75 grams of bubbly starter discard, and I add it to my flour. And then I'm going to add 440 grams of water. Now, my water is refrigerator water that my husband put through like a really good filter, so it's like pretty pure and clean. Make sure you're using good water. And then I went ahead and gave it all a good mix. So I am going to let this bread ferment overnight. There's not going to be any stretching, any folding, any like fussing with it just because, we're not doing that. So once you've added all your water, so make sure you add your water and your sourdough last. That's kind of what I do. You want to go ahead and give it a good mix and use a big bowl. I actually weighed everything in a smaller bowl and then I added it to a bigger bowl and I started stirring it up. If you need to, use your hands. Your dough will look like really shaggy and whatnot. So once it looks something like this, add some plastic wrap to the top, let it ferment overnight. It's hot here, so it definitely fermented really well overnight. If it's colder, you might, want to put it in a warmer spot. Just keep an eye on it, I guess, if you can overnight, And this is what it looks like when you pull back some of the, dough. It's all bubbly and delicious. I love it. If it doesn't look like this, if it hasn't risen overnight, something's not right. I'm assuming that the starter wasn't active or something. So just, start over or just make sure your starter is super active. So once it looks like this, all I've done was spray a baking dish with some non-cooked spray, and I'm using a bread scraper, and I think it's called a bread scraper, and I'm just using it to plop my dough into my baking dish. And once it's in my baking dish, all I'm going to do is cover it. So it's definitely not the prettiest loaf of bread you've ever seen, but I mean, it'll do the job, right? So all I've done is plop it into my baking dish. I use the same plastic wrap that I used earlier with it, no need to waste. And then I just let it ferment for another half hour or so. Make sure you preheat your oven to 425 degrees. Again, like if it's colder, you're going to need to allow it to ferment just a little bit more or let it rise again for a little bit longer. I just let it for 30 minutes and it was fine. Like I said, it's hot right now when I'm making this recipe. And I make this recipe quite often because I love having sourdough on hand and I don't like buying store-bought bread. It's just not all that great. So take off the plastic wrap, pop it in the preheated oven, bake it for around 40 to 50 minutes. This will all vary based on your oven. My oven is just not the best. Don't ask me. I don't know. Once it's baked, it should look something like this. Allow it to slightly cool, but before it slightly cools, add some butter to the top. I'm using salted butter. I just love doing this. I love the color. I like the look that it gives it. You don't have to, but I do like that it adds extra color. So I added some salted butter. You can use unsalted. Do whatever works for you, whatever you have on hand, and then allow it to cool slightly. Once it's cooled slightly, you do want to remove it from the baking dish because you want it to cool completely. So make sure it cools completely before you slice into it. That's crucial. I don't always wait, but I do wait if I'm not going to be eating the bread the same day, which I usually don't unless I have guests or something like that. So this is what the loaf looks like. Again, it's no artisan loaf. I do make artisan bread, of course. It's just a lot of work when you have a toddler, when you have a baby. So I just tend to not bake so much when things are a little bit more complicated. I like this recipe because you forget it, you mix it, no fuss. It's pretty easy. I like that when you cut it, it's pretty easy to cut. Again, with artisan bread, you kind of struggle, if you know what I mean. If you make artisan bread, you know what I mean. But you kind of struggle with the crust and it makes a huge mess. This does not make a huge mess. And I love that you can actually cut the bread. You can slice the bread into pretty thin slices, which I love. And yeah, so I'm just slicing the bread. I'm showing you guys that you could slice it pretty thinly, which, like I said, I love. And the mess is pretty contained. It doesn't make the mess that the artisan bread. Don't get me wrong, I love artisan bread, but I just don't have time for it. So you slice it up. What I like to do is I like to slice it all up. I like to place it in a Ziploc bag. This is what it looks like. It pretty much just looks like a homemade sandwich bread, in my opinion. And so once I put it in a Ziploc bag, I just freeze it. And whenever I want a fresh piece of bread, I just pull out my bread that's frozen and thaw it out or toast it or whatever the case is. And I have fresh bread that tastes extremely delicious. I love the flavor and the texture is just perfect. So make sure you guys give this recipe a try. If you do, let me know. Let me know if you guys are into sourdough stuff. I love making sourdough stuff. Make sure you guys like this video. Give me a comment. Leave me a comment. Make sure you're subscribed to my channel. And let me know what else you guys would like me to make. Like I said, I'm on a kick of making sourdough stuff. It's just super easy. And I love when sourdough stuff are easy. If you're an artisan baker, don't come after me. I know this is an artisan bread, but every now and then we need a little break from complicated things.